Hello and welcome back to Cracking the Cryptic. Now this is a big day for the channel. We've just released our new Sudoku app, Classic Sudoku. It is live on all platforms, and yeah, it's an app we're so proud of. It's taken a long time to actually release it, and that's because creating Sudokus by hand is not easy, and creating good Sudokus by hand is really not easy. And yeah, we're delighted it's now out, and we hope that you guys enjoy it. I'll put some links under the video if any of you are interested in having a look. Now today I have got this puzzle to look at. Now this puzzle is by Bastien Vial-Jaime, the French, well, a brilliant French solver and setter of Sudoku, and I was having a look at his blog recently, and there is the most extraordinary collection of Sudoku puzzles on there. And you know, I was just flicking through and I saw this one, and to me this sort of puzzle, it just looks incredible. How can this puzzle have a unique solution? And anyway, so that's why I've chosen it. I want to have a go at it. It is just, it looks stunning. So you can see it's a sort of hybrid puzzle of killer Sudoku. So there are a few killer cages here. Remember that where we have killer cages, the cells in the box have to add up to these totals without repeating a digit. And little killer. Now little killer is a variation where you have these numbers outside the grid that tell you the sum of the squares in that direction. And the only, I suppose, little thing to remember here is that, for example, along this line, the 9 line, these 4 cells have to sum up to 9, but it is absolutely possible that you can repeat a digit in that total. You couldn't repeat these 2 digits because they're in the same 3 by 3 block, but this digit, for example, and that digit could be the same, as indeed could that one. So I'm going to try this for you in a moment. Now, if you want to have a go at the puzzle, and definitely recommend it, just look at it. I mean, it looks stunning. Click on the link under the video. That'll take you to our software where you can have a go. And with that, I am going to have a look at this. Now, where shall we look to begin? Right, well, there's an 8 here, so we know there must be a 1 in one of those squares. Right, okay, sorry, I do see how to start this. Look at this, this is beautiful. 8s and 9s here. So we know those 7 cells sum up to 17, but 5 of those cells are in the same 3 by 3 block. So these cells obviously are all in this block. So what's the minimum we could make these 5 cells add up to? It would have to be 15. We'd have to put 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5. So if these cells were 15, but I know that these 7 cells are 17, I can do that. That must be a 1, and that must be a 1. So that must be a 1 because we know the 8 total must include a 1. And so these 2 cells sum to 7, and these 2 cells sum to 7. Okay, so we know that they're 2, 3, 4 and 5 in some order. But I don't think we know which order they are. No. Okay, so we're going to have to... Right, this 11 cage doesn't include a 1, so it must include a 2. And that's because if we add 3, 4 and 5 together, we get 12. So we know there's a 2 in here. So this is either 2, 3, 6 or 2, 4, 5. And I don't think we can tell which of those is correct. Right, those squares must be 6, 7, 8 and 9, I suppose. An 8 cage must contain a 1. Why is there a 1 over there? I didn't mean to put a 1 there. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so what do I do next here? 11 and 10, that's 21, so maybe I have to use this. Oh, right. Yeah, I think I do. So this square, it can't be a 1 or a 2, so the minimum this square can be is a 3. And this square can't contain a 1, so the minimum this square can be is a 2. So 3 plus 2 is 5. But we've got this thing going on with a 15 total again. So the minimum I could make these cells would be 15, plus 2 plus 3 would be 20. So in fact, there is very little freedom around these yellow squares. If these add up to 15, these would have to add up to 6. They couldn't be, yeah, they couldn't be less than that. So either these squares add up to, if this is 2 and 3, these have to add up to 16. And the only other option would be if this could be 1 bigger, and this could be 1 bigger. If this is 3 and 3, that's possible. 4 and 2 would be possible. 3 and 2 would be possible. But anything bigger than that, if we make these cells add up to 7, we can't make these squares small enough. So now, so we know there's a 1, 2, 3 and a 4 in these cells. And we know the other digit is a 5 or a 6. 5 or a 6. Now here's something nice. Here is something nice. So let's look at this box. We know that the numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4 will appear in those squares. And we know that because either, if this is a 4, this 11 has to be 2, 3, 6. If it's a 3, this 11 has to be 2, 4, 5. So there is no way the numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4 are appearing in those squares. Now in this box we know the same thing. The 1, 2, 3 and the 4 are not in this 18 cage. Therefore, how do we make 18 if we can't use the numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4? Well, they have to be 5, 6 and 7. That's the only way. And 6 and 7. Okay, so now where do I put 8 and 9 in this box? It must be there. That's not 8 and 9. And now there's a 5, 6, 7 triple in column 3. So these squares are not 5. Now if these squares are not 5, we know that this square and this square add up to 7. So if this can't be a 5, that can't be a 2. Same there. So now there is definitely a 2 in one of these squares, and there's definitely a 5 in one of those squares, which means there is no 2. In fact, there's quite a lot we can eliminate from these two squares. We can eliminate 2, we can eliminate 5 and 6, and we can eliminate 1 from all of those because of these ones. we know there is no 7 in this 11 cage, so there must be a 7 in one of those two positions, so there is not a 7 in this square. Therefore, these three squares are 7, 8, and 9. So, can we use these totals now to disambiguate this? We know the 1 is in one of these two squares. Oh, yeah, maybe. Well, I don't know. Let's just have a look at this though, because if this is a 1, then the 10 total cannot include a 2, because we know these two squares now are either 3 and 6 or 4 and 5, because they must add up to 9. And therefore, where can the 2 go in this block? If this is a 1, this square must be a 2. Therefore, that would be a 2. 6, 4, 5, 3, 6. Ah, yeah, now this is quite interesting now. Because, yeah, this is quite interesting. So now we know these two squares would add up to 9 in this scenario. Now, there are two ways. Obviously, it could be 3, 6, or it could be 4, 5. But if it's 4, 5, look what happens. Because this square would then be a 3, we'd have a 3, 4, 5 triple here. And this square could only be a 6. Now, that breaks immediately, because if this is a 6, that square's a 3, and this 3 is nasty, because it forces a 4 there and a 4 there. So in this line here, which has to add up to 11, we'd have 4 plus 2 plus 4, and now we can't make this square a 1. So that doesn't work. Now, I wonder, yeah, this doesn't work. Now look, if we make this 3, 6 on the other hand, this doesn't work either. Let me show you that. So if this is 3, 6, we know that this square now must be a 4 or a 5, as must this square. So this square, yeah, this doesn't work. So if this is 3, 6, this is a 4, this is a 4, this is a 5, and this is a 3. And now look, we've got 4 plus 2 plus 3, so this square here is a 2, and now the 8 cage is broken, because it must be 1, 3, and 4, but we already have a 3 and a 4 here. So this square can't be a 3 and a 4, so this pattern fails. Now, that I'm quite sure was not how I was meant to do that, because that was quite difficult. But it does prove that this square cannot be a 1, and therefore this square must be a 1. Now, if this square is a 1, what can we do? Now this square must be a 1. Now the 10 total, these three squares cannot include a 1, and so it must be 2, 3, 5. That's the only way of making 10 in 3 squares without using a 1. So this square now, well, this square is a 6. This square must be a 4. Now if this is a 6, what can that tell us? This square is a 7. Therefore this is a 5. This is a 7. So this square here is not not 5. And it's not 2 because we know there's a 2 in one of those two squares. So that's 3. That's 2. Eliminate the 3's from these two squares. These add up to 7, so that one must be a 4 to make the 11 total work. Therefore, this 11 cage is 2, 3, 6 in some order. Can we tell what the order is? I'm sure we can. I just have to think about it. Now look. These 4, there's no 4 in either of those squares. Therefore, there must be a 4 and a 2 in one of these squares. 5, 7. I mean, there's not a 7 here. I mean, how? This is so clever. I mean, this can't be a 7. 1, 3. These two squares must be 3 and 4 because we've got the 2 here now. This 6 means there's a 6 in one of those two squares. Ooh, and look, this can't be a 5. If we make this a 5, look what happens. Exactly the same logic as the 6. We get a 5 into one of those two squares. And now how do we fill this 19 cage? This is very cunning. If this is a 6, these two squares have to sum up to 13. But we can't use 4 and 9. We can't use 5 and 8. We can't use 6 and 7. So this can't be a 6 if there is a 5 here. But if this is a 5, these two squares have to sum up to 14 without using 5, 9, without using 6, 8. So that means that actually that square is a 5. That square is a 2. That means this is a 5, that's a 3, therefore that's a 4 and that's a 2. That means this is a 3. Must be a 2 in one of those squares. Must be a 3 in one of those squares. Must be a there must be a 1 in one of these squares, and it can't go in the 19 cage. It must be in one of these two positions. Now, maybe I'm meant to use the 13 and the 12 now. Let's have a look at this. So that would be these squares. Let's just think about this for a second. So these have to add up to 25. So again, maybe we have to do the same trick again. So the minimum value for these squares would be 15. So the maximum value for those two squares would be 10. But this square, look, can't be a 1, 2, 3 or a 4. So the minimum value of this square is 5. So this is 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9. And therefore this square, I suppose, it can't be 5 or 4. So if this is 5, this still has to be less than 5. So this has to be a 1, 2 or a 3. This can never be bigger than that. It can never be a 6, for example, because 6 plus 5 is 11, plus the minimum we can make these cells would be 15. That would give 26. That breaks this total. So this square is a bit restricted. No. This is much more restricted than that, because look, we haven't... this is clever. Now look at this square. Now let's imagine this was a big number. Let's imagine it was a 9 for a moment. Now if this is a 9, it forms a triple with these two squares on the left. Now what is the effect of that triple on this area here? You can see that it's going to force a 7, 8 or a 9 into this pattern here, because I could hide 2 of the 7, 8 and 9 in these 2 squares, but the third one is going to have to go into the yellow squares here. So if this is a 9, the minimum that these can be now is not 15 anymore, it's 17. And 9 plus 17 is 26 already without even considering that square. So that's not 9. And if it's 8, no, 8 breaks as well, because that would give 25 without considering this square. Now, can we rule out 7? Yes, we can. Yes, we can rule out 7, because if this is 7, look what happens. If this is 7, that's 7. And now I have to put a 7 into one of those squares. So this top line is now a 1, 3, 7 triple. But, so how can I make this? I could make this a 1. 1 plus 7 is 8. Therefore, I'd need these squares to add up to 17 or less. But I can't do that anymore, because I know that there must be a 7, 8 or a 9 in the yellow squares because of the 7, 8, 9 triple here. But if I include a 7 in one of those 2 squares, I'm pushing the 3 over to this square, and therefore the minimum I could make this total would be massive. It would be much too high. So that is not possible. This square is not a 7 either. Let's get rid of it. So this is a 5 or a 6. Now, can we rule out another one? No, we're not going to look. If I make this a 6, the problem is it has very little interaction over here. So it's not really doing anything to the area I want to restrict. Oh. Okay, what am I meant to do then? Must be a 1 in one of those squares. You can see 14 and 15, so we've got 29 into those squares, but I've no idea how we... 29 doesn't... Maybe I have to use this 21 cage. So these 2 squares have to sum to 14. So that's 5, 9 or 6, 8. Don't see how that's going to help me. But look, this 7, because you can't repeat a number in a cage, the 7 is forced into one of those squares. Yeah, there is something there. So the 7 is in one of these squares. Now we can do some arithmetic on this block, look, because look, these 2 squares have to sum to 14, 15, plus the 16 cage is 31. So these squares sum up to 14. So if that one is a 7, these 2 squares have to sum up to 7. But they can't be 2, 5, they can't be 3, 4, and they can't be 1, 6. So this is not a 7. There is a 7 in the 16 cage. Now, that means that we need another 9. No, it can't be 1, 8, can't be 2, 7. So this is either 7, 3, 6 or 7, 4, 5. Come on, can we do it? I don't know how. Bobbins, I don't believe it. That felt so good. Why does that not? Well, now where does the 2 go in this block? This 2 here forces the 2 into one of those squares because the 2 cannot go in the 16 cage. Now it's got a 7 in it, otherwise it would become 2 7s and a 2, which is obviously repeating a 7. So these 3 squares sum up to 14, including a 2. So we've got, and we need another 12 without using 7. So it's either 2 4 8 or 2 3 9. And I can, if it's 3 9, I can obviously restrict that, but 6 8. Still be a 5. 5 could still go here. That's so annoying. No, I don't see how to do that. Do let me know in the comments. I think I'm missing something, but I can't see how to do it. Let's try the 19 cage. Oh yeah, this 19 cage is a bit restricted actually, look, because we've got 1, 2, 3 and 4 in the block. And these 2 squares now can't be 5 and 6 because we've already got this square limited to 5 and 6. So the minimum I could make these 2 squares would be 5 and 7. And that would put a 7 there. So it's not 5, 7. 5, 8 would put a 6 there. That doesn't work. 5, 9 would put a 5 there. That repeats the 5. That doesn't work. So there is no 5 in these 2 squares. The 5 could still go in one of those 2 squares. Okay, well, let's try 6s. So if this is a 6, we could have 6 and 7. That doesn't work. That repeats the 6. 6 and 8. 6 and 8 does work. Well, something has to work. So 6 and 8 would put 6 here, 8 there, 5 there. 6 obviously has to be in this position. So 6 and 9 would put a 4 there. That doesn't work. So if we have to go higher than 6 here, if we put 7, it would have to be 7, 8, 4. That doesn't work. 7, 9, 3 does work. And 8, 9, 2 doesn't work. So there are only 2 possibilities. That is it. This is either a 3 or a 5. And this is interesting now, because now if I make this a 6, I'm doing damage to this area, because making this a 6 forces this to be a 3. Let's look at that. So if that's a 6, we know this can't be 6 and 8, so it has to be 7 and 9. These 2 squares have to be 7 and 9. That has to be a 3. And now, what is the minimum we can make this total? It can be 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, I think. Is that right? 2, 6, 18. Yes, that's the absolute minimum I could make this. 1, 2, 4, 5 and 6 add up to 18. Plus 6, 24. So it would force this to be a 1. Which forces that to be a 1. Now the 13 total now require... that doesn't work, because that requires that to be a 5. So if this is a 6, it's impossible. Either this is just broken, because it has to be big enough that we get to 25 before we consider this number, or it's just small enough to allow this to be a 1, but making this a 1 breaks row 8 of the grid. So that is not a 6. So we are able to make progress. That's a 5. And Now, what does that mean? What am I missing here? So this is now 135 triple. Maybe I'm meant to still focus on this then. So 5. So 1, 1, 6. That works okay, doesn't it? Oh, of course. The 6 had to go in one of these two positions. So if this is a 5, that's a 6. Okay. So that means that's an 8 and that's a 5. There's no 5 in this. This is a 1-3 pair. Oh, and now if I make this a 1, that breaks. If this is a 1, this is a 1, and now what do I make this square to add up to 13? That's got to be a 6, and that repeats the 6. So this square is not 1. And it's not 2. It's not 2 either, because that gives 7 here. These two squares have to add up to 6, but this one can only be a 1 or a 3. So this has to either be a 5, there's already a 5 there, and there in fact, and if this is a 3, I'd have to repeat the 3. So this square is actually a 3, which means that's a 3, that's a 1. Now we can do this total. That's got to be a 2. And now we should be able to do the 12 as well, shouldn't we? Because these two squares have to add up to 11, and you can see, therefore, we can't use 2, 9, 3, 8, or 5, 6. They've got to be 4 and 7, and there's a 4 in one of those squares. So this square is a 4, this is a 7. These squares are 6, 8, and 9. And I'm sure this now works. 7, 14, 14 and 11 is 25. That looks right, like it's working. Okay, now 3s, look. There must be a 3 in one of those two squares. This 10 cage is not now 2, 3 and 5, so it must include a 1. The 1 can't be here because of this one. So this square must be a 1 in the block. This is unbelievable. Now, look, this 1 is nice because these two squares now have to sum up to 15. So they're either 6 and 9 or 7 and 8. Now, importantly, they are not 4 or 5. And look, we have a 4 and a 5 here. So there is no 4 and a 5 in any of these yellow squares. So I can try and put one of the 4 or 5 here, but the other one will have to be in the 10 cage. Now once one of the 4 or 5 is in the 10 cage, the other one must be as well, because we know we've already locked a 1 in here. The other two squares have to add up to 9. So this becomes a 1, 4, 5 cage. That can't be the 1. This can't be a 4 or a 5, so that's got to be a 1. Therefore, that's not a 1. So 4 and a 5 in this row here. That one's not a 5. Now, where does the 2 go in this block? It can only go here. Now I suspect we're now going to have to look at this shape. Let's colour that one in. We know these add to 15, we know these add to 15, but we don't really know how that... Now hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. There's a 1 in here already, so that these 5 squares in this block are got to be much higher than when we were looking at 15 totals in the other positions. If we can't have a 1, the minimum these could be would be, in fact, there's got to be a 2 there, just looking at this. Sorry, I've missed that. Look, 2s, 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 and 2s there mean that that square is a 2. And the minimum we could make this would be 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Oh, no, 5's not possible because of 5's here and here. There's a 5 in one of those squares. So 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7. 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7 is 22. 24. So this square has to be 5 or less because of the 29 total. And look, 1, 2, 5 are already taken. So this square has to be a 3 or a 4. I'm just wondering if we can eliminate. Oh, we can, look. Yes. If this is a 3, that has to be a 3 because we've got pencil mark 3's here. Now these 3 cells sum to 8. I need that one to be a 7 to give 15, but that's a 7 already. In fact, that's a 7 as well. So this is not 3. This is 4. Now there's a 4 in one of those squares. And we've got 6 here, so these 2 squares have got to sum up to 9. Okay, but we know there's a 4 in one of these 2 positions, so if the 4 is here, this would have to be a 5, which it can't be, so the 4 is not here, so this is the 4. And now we can use the 14 total, so this must be an 8, and therefore that's a 3 and this is a 6. Let's just double check that the total works here. So 12, 17, 27, 29. Yes. This adds to 14. Yes. This adds to 15. Yes. So this is 5, 7, 9 in some order. This 8 means that's got to be an 8 in this block. Therefore that's a 7. Therefore, we can resolve the 8 and the 9. 8's into one of these 2 squares. These 2 squares have got to be 6 and 9 in some order. This can't be a 4, so this 4 up here. This must be an 8. Therefore that's an 8. Therefore that's an 8. How on earth do you go about constructing this puzzle? This must be a 9. This is a 7. This must be a 6 up here to complete the column. That's a 9. Therefore this is a 9. That's a 5. That's a 7. This is not 7 anymore. In fact, that must be a 3 looking at the options. So these are 6 and that's 6 now, that's 7. I think if I haven't made a mistake, we are probably going to be able to finish this now. It's taken me an inordinate amount of time, but I have to say this is something else, this puzzle. I mean, what a construction this is. 7 goes there. Looking at this row, actually I can resolve the 2 and the 6, therefore this must be a 3. One of these squares must be a 9, I think. I'm going to be so gutted if I've made a mistake. This is a 4, that's a 5, that's a 6, that's a 9, that's a 5, that's a 4, that's a 4, that's a 3. This square here, well, that must be an 8, this one must be, yeah, it can still be a 2. Just double checking. This 1 resolves the 1 and the 9, that resolves the 9 and the 6, and hopefully that looks right, doesn't it? Check. Yes. Oh my goodness, look at the time, 40 minutes. Oh, I'm so sorry, but that was so hard, but breathtakingly brilliant. I mean, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Do let me know. There are a couple of points I got a bit stuck, and I'm sure that I'm missing something simple, but what a puzzle that is. As usual, feedback most welcome. See you soon on Cracking the Cryptic.